Indianapolis, April 1st, 2014. Around 5:30 in the morning, the silence along West 16th Street was shattered by a single gunshot. A woman living nearby looked out her window and spotted a man lying in the roadway. She immediately contacted emergency services. When she rushed outside to help, the scene on the pavement made no sense. A young man was lying in the middle of the street. He was wearing only sweatpants. His sneakers, t-shirt, and jacket were nearby, not scattered like there had been a struggle, but placed aside almost carefully, as if he had removed them himself just moments earlier. The man had a gunshot wound to the abdomen. He was in severe shock, but still conscious. He tried to speak, struggling to force out words, but the injury made it nearly impossible. Police officers and paramedics arrived within 5 minutes, but by then, his condition had already become critical. Investigators found no immediate clues at the scene. He had no identification, no cell phone, no keys. In those first few hours, his identity remained a complete mystery. At 7:40 that morning, despite every effort from medical staff, the young man passed away. Why was he found partially undressed on a cold Indianapolis roadway? Why would the person responsible leave behind clothing and shoes without taking anything of value? Who was this man, and how did he end up there just before sunrise? Today, we're going to piece together a story where system failures and random encounters led to an ending that still feels impossible. And the answers to what happened that night are hidden in details most people never notice. Whenever we hear stories like this, one question always comes to mind. Who was the person at the center of it all? Who was the man whose life ended in such a senseless way? Nathan Benjamin Trapuzzano was not just another face passing through life unnoticed. He was born on May 17, 1989, in Pennsylvania, and grew up in a family with 5 siblings. Even though Nathan was the 4th born, he carried a quiet confidence that naturally earned the respect of his older brothers. He wasn't the kind of person who demanded attention or authority. People simply wanted to follow his lead. Those who knew Nathan often said his talents felt almost impossible to fit into one person. On one side, there was discipline and toughness. He held a black belt in karate and excelled in track and field. On the other, there was remarkable artistry. Nathan played both the violin and piano with incredible skill. That balance between strength and creativity made him unforgettable to the people around him. Yet despite all of it, he never bragged about his accomplishments. Friends described him as humble, quick-witted, deeply thoughtful, and spiritually grounded. In college, Nathan chose a path many people his age would have considered unusual. He immersed himself in classical studies, focusing on Latin, ancient Greek, and classical literature. His academic achievements earned him a full scholarship, and somewhere in those university hallways, he met the woman who would become the love of his life, Jennifer. At the time, she was studying nursing. What brought them together wasn't just love. It was an unshakable foundation built on faith. Both Nathan and Jennifer were deeply devoted, practicing Catholics. For them, faith was never just tradition or routine. The values they shared shaped every decision they made and every vision they had for the future. Very early on, they both realized this was the kind of connection meant to last a lifetime. Shortly after Nathan graduated from college, the two were married in 2013. They were the kind of couple that carefully built their future one step at a time, thoughtfully, responsibly, and with real purpose behind every choice they made. After the wedding, they relocated to Indianapolis. Nathan, known for his sharp analytical mind, landed a job as a software developer at Ivy Tech Community College. It's one of the largest community college systems in the country, and his work focused on technical development and maintaining critical systems. Jennifer was just as driven. She enrolled in graduate school to continue advancing her medical career. Together, they looked like the definition of a successful young couple. Both working hard, both continuing their education, both full of ambition and long-term plans. Nathan had that rare kind of inner discipline that made people trust him completely. Co-workers at Ivy Tech later described him as the person everyone could depend on when situations became difficult. His sense of responsibility showed up in every part of his life. He hated leaving things unfinished and always pushed himself to be as helpful as possible to the people around him. That same drive for perfection would later become important when investigators began reconstructing the events of that morning. Nathan wanted to excel at work, be a devoted husband, and, as he often talked about, become the best father he could possibly be. But beneath the image of a successful young professional was a man living by an incredibly strict personal routine. Nathan woke up long before sunrise almost every day, so he could accomplish as much as possible before the normal workday even began. It was part of his personal philosophy. Never waste a single minute. That detail will matter later when we break down the timeline of that morning. But for now, one thing is important to understand. Nathan Benjamin Trapuzzano was a man who built his life around order, structure, and purpose. And knowing how much effort and heart he poured into creating that life makes what happened next feel even more disturbing. Not long after returning from their honeymoon, the couple's world changed in the best possible way. Jennifer began to suspect she was pregnant, and a test soon confirmed it. Nathan's reaction was exactly what Jennifer hoped for. Pure happiness. The thought of becoming a father filled him with excitement. They already knew they were expecting a daughter, and they had even chosen her name, Cecilia Marie. The first months of 2014 became a season of preparation and anticipation. Nathan and Jennifer spent their time getting the nursery ready and preparing for the moment their entire world would change forever. By May of 2014, the family was preparing to celebrate two major milestones. First would come Nathan and Jennifer's wedding anniversary, and just 15 days later, Nathan's 25th birthday. But by then, Nathan had already made major changes to his daily routine. Before Jennifer's pregnancy, he regularly went to the gym after work in the evenings. But once they learned they were expecting Cecilia Marie, his priorities shifted almost immediately. Nathan felt it was wrong to leave Jennifer home alone at night. And more than that, he already knew that once his daughter arrived, he would want to spend every possible moment with his family, instead of being away at workouts. So Nathan came up with what he believed was the perfect compromise. Rather than giving up exercise completely, he began waking up at 5 o'clock every morning while the city was still asleep. While Jennifer rested, he would head outside for a run or a long walk through the neighborhood. The routine was simple. By the time Jennifer woke up, he'd already be back home, showered, and ready for breakfast and the workday ahead. His evenings now belonged entirely to the people he loved most. The evening of March 31st, 2014, felt completely ordinary. Nathan and Jennifer decided to get out of the house for a little while and drove to McDonald's for ice cream. It was a short, simple trip before they returned to their apartment and went to bed. Later, Jennifer would remember one specific moment from that night more vividly than anything else. Nathan rested his hand on her stomach, and at that exact moment, Cecilia Marie moved for the first time against his palm. At some point during that quiet evening, Jennifer admitted something that had been weighing on her mind. She told Nathan that the idea of living without him terrified her. She couldn't imagine how she would handle life if anything ever happened to him. Nathan's response was calm, almost casual. He simply told her, "You'd be able to keep going without me." At the time, it didn't sound eerie or prophetic. It felt more like reassurance, a husband trying to comfort his wife and remind her of her own strength. Just a few hours later, at exactly 5 on the morning of April 1st, Nathan woke up to his alarm. He moved carefully and quietly so he wouldn't wake Jennifer. As he prepared for his usual morning walk, he intentionally left his wallet, bank cards, and cell phone on the nightstand. It was a personal safety rule he always followed. If you're outside before sunrise, don't carry anything valuable that could attract the wrong attention. Nathan stepped outside wearing lightweight workout clothes, fully expecting to return home within the hour. But what he didn't know was that his familiar morning route was already crossing paths with people completely without mercy. For Jennifer, April 1st didn't begin with jokes or pranks. It began with a feeling she couldn't explain, a growing sense that something was wrong. She woke up around 7 that morning. By then, the apartment should have already been filled with the usual sounds of Nathan getting ready for work. According to his routine, he normally would have returned from his run, taken a shower, and been finishing breakfast before heading to Ivy Tech. But the apartment was completely silent. The first thing Jennifer noticed was that all of Nathan's belongings were still there. His cell phone, wallet, and keys sat untouched on the nightstand. Nearby was the clean set of clothes he had laid out for work that morning. Everything pointed to one disturbing fact. Nathan had never made it back home after leaving shortly after 5 a.m. Without wasting time, Jennifer headed outside. She knew Nathan's usual route, the same few streets where he walked or jogged every morning before sunrise. At first, she wasn't panicking. She methodically searched the neighborhood, following the sidewalks he always took, hoping she'd spot him somewhere ahead. Maybe he had twisted an ankle. Maybe he had gotten sick and stopped to rest. But as she got closer to West 16th Street, the feeling in her chest became impossible to ignore. Something was very wrong. Then Jennifer reached an intersection and saw something most people only witness on the evening news. The street was completely blocked off with bright yellow police tape. Several patrol vehicles sat nearby with their emergency lights flashing through the early morning darkness. She approached the officers and asked what had happened. At first, they responded carefully with standard answers. An investigation was underway, the area was restricted, and they couldn't share details. Jennifer explained that her husband had gone out for his morning run nearly 2 hours earlier and still hadn't come home. One of the officers then asked an important question. Had her husband been carrying identification? Jennifer answered no. She explained that Nathan always left valuables at home during his early morning walks. That answer immediately changed the atmosphere. At that point, investigators still hadn't officially identified the man found on the street because he carried nothing except workout clothes. Jennifer pulled out her phone and showed them a photograph of Nathan. The officers instantly recognized the face. It was the same young man they had loaded into an ambulance just a few hours earlier. After a brief conversation among themselves, they gently asked Jennifer to sit inside a patrol car. And there, inside that vehicle, she heard the words that divided her life into a before and an after. The man in the photograph had passed away at the hospital at 7:40 that morning, never regaining consciousness. While Jennifer had been retracing his steps and hoping for a simple explanation, doctors had already lost the fight to save his life in the operating room. News of Nathan Trapuzzano's death spread through the neighborhood almost instantly. Local residents weren't just frightened, they were furious. The area where the incident happened had carried a troubled reputation for years. Reports of shootings were not uncommon there, but most of those incidents were believed to involve disputes between street-level crews or people connected to illegal activity involving prohibited substances. Ordinary residents, people completely uninvolved in that world, were rarely affected. But this case was different. The victim was a law-abiding software developer and soon-to-be father who had simply gone out for his usual morning run. As detectives interviewed witnesses, it quickly became clear they had almost nothing to work with. No one had seen the exact moment the shot was fired. The only known witness had discovered Nathan already lying in the street. The person responsible seemed to disappear into the darkness before sunrise, leaving behind almost nothing except a shell casing. Still, investigators understood something important. In a modern city, it's nearly impossible to travel several blocks without appearing on at least one security camera. Detectives began collecting surveillance footage from every possible business and intersection near the scene. And before long, one camera mounted outside a nearby store provided the first critical clue about who had been following Nathan that morning. The search eventually led detectives to a small tire shop just a few blocks away from where the attack occurred. The owner, a man named Jess, recognized Nathan immediately. He often saw him jogging past the shop during his early morning workouts, and the two usually exchanged friendly greetings. Just weeks before the incident, Jess had installed a surveillance camera above the entrance. That small decision would become one of the biggest breaks in the entire investigation. The footage captured the final known moments of Nathan's life. The video was grainy and black and white, but investigators could still make out the sequence of events clearly enough. First, Nathan appears in frame, moving steadily down the sidewalk during his usual morning route. Only seconds later, two young men enter the frame behind him. One of them noticeably increases his pace, quickly closing the distance between himself and Nathan, while the second follows several steps behind, almost as if covering the area. The camera never captured the exact moment of the shooting because the group moved into a blind spot outside the camera's range. But in the final visible seconds of footage, Nathan can be seen raising his hands, a gesture of complete surrender. While investigators worked to enhance the footage and identify the figures, something happened across town that initially seemed completely unrelated to Nathan's case. Roughly 18 hours after the young programmer's death, a confrontation broke out at a local restaurant. A 16-year-old teenager named Simeon Adams, known in certain circles by the nickname Red, got into an altercation with a man named Eric. The argument escalated into a physical confrontation, and during the chaos, Simeon pulled out a handgun and fired 3 times at the other man. But this time, things didn't go according to the attacker's plan. Eric was also carrying a firearm, and acting in self-defense, he returned fire. Simeon suffered a severe gunshot wound to the neck and was rushed to the very same hospital where doctors had fought to save Nathan earlier that morning. The teenager's condition was critical. Medical staff reportedly weren't sure he would survive through the night. When officers arrived at the scene of the second shooting, they collected the weapon and shell casings for routine ballistic testing. What came back from the crime lab became a massive breakthrough for investigators. The bullet recovered from Eric's body and the shell casing found beside Nathan on West 16th Street had both been fired from the exact same handgun. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered the firearm had been reported stolen just weeks earlier during a burglary at a specialty gun store. Nearly 30 firearms had been taken during that incident, and now one of those weapons had connected 2 separate crimes committed only hours apart. The nickname Red suddenly began surfacing in multiple witness statements. Investigators learned that only hours before the attack on Nathan, Simeon and several associates had allegedly attempted to steal a vehicle near a local strip club. According to reports, the group fled after being confronted by a security guard. At that point, the pieces finally began falling into place. A group of young suspects had apparently been moving through the area before sunrise, searching for easy targets, and their path lined up almost perfectly with Nathan's regular morning route. Police now had their primary suspect, but one major question still remained unanswered. How was a 16-year-old with such an extensive record still out on the streets? Once detectives located Simeon Adams' accomplice, the events of that morning on West 16th Street finally started forming a complete timeline. Remember the strange scene investigators described earlier? Nathan's clothes and shoes lying neatly on the pavement beside him? The explanation turned out to be unbelievably cold. According to the second suspect's statement, when they caught up to Nathan, Simeon demanded money. Nathan calmly explained that he wasn't carrying anything valuable. No wallet, no phone, nothing at all. But Simeon didn't believe him. Convinced Nathan might be hiding valuables in his clothing or shoes, Simeon ordered him to remove them. Nathan, despite being a black belt in karate and known for his discipline under pressure, chose not to fight back. Instead, he did exactly what experts often recommend during armed confrontations: avoid escalation. He removed his sneakers, shirt, and jacket, dropping them onto the pavement one by one. Standing there partially undressed, hands raised in surrender, Nathan tried to show the armed teenager that he posed no threat and truly had nothing worth taking. But according to investigators, Simeon became frustrated after realizing there was nothing to steal. And then he fired a shot into Nathan's abdomen before running from the scene. Now let's look at how this 16-year-old ended up crossing paths with Nathan in the first place. Because once investigators examined Simeon Adams' history, it became painfully clear that this encounter should never have happened at all. By that point, Simeon already had an extensive juvenile record involving 29 separate offenses, including several serious crimes. In December of 2013, he had been arrested in connection with a stolen vehicle case. But despite the growing pattern of offenses, the court chose to release him under house arrest while awaiting formal hearings scheduled for April. A court-appointed supervision officer was supposed to monitor Simeon's house arrest. His job was simple in theory: make unannounced visits to the home and confirm that Simeon was actually there. And this is where the most disturbing part of the story begins: a chain of failures that should never have happened. The officer arrived once. Simeon wasn't home. He came back a second time. Again, the house was empty. Under department policy, by the third violation, an arrest warrant should have already been requested. But instead of taking immediate action, the officer continued documenting the violations without escalating the situation. In total, Simeon Adams violated the terms of his house arrest 9 separate times. The 9th violation was recorded on March 5, 2014. The officer informed the court, but in his report he stopped short of recommending immediate detention, allowing Simeon to remain free while awaiting trial. And that detail would haunt the case forever. Because if the system had acted after the 5th violation, or even the 9th, Simeon would have been behind bars by early March. That means he would never have participated in the theft of nearly 30 handguns from the gun store. And he never would have crossed paths with Nathan Trapuzzano during that early morning run before sunrise. The supervision officer would later recognize the scale of the mistake and resign from his position. But for Nathan's family, that realization changed nothing. Against doctors' expectations, Simeon Adams survived. Once he emerged from a coma and recovered from the gunshot wound to his neck, the justice system that had stalled for months finally began moving at full speed. Even though Simeon had been only 16 at the time of the crime, prosecutors argued that the severity of the offense justified trying him as an adult. The legal proceedings stretched on for nearly 2 years, and by the time sentencing arrived, the teenager standing before the court was legally an adult, someone whose entire life had already become defined by chaos and criminal behavior. The defense attempted to build sympathy around Simeon's upbringing. During the trial, details about his family history surfaced. His mother had drowned when he was only a year old. and his father had spent years cycling in and out of prison. Simeon was largely raised by his uncle, who later told the court he had genuinely tried to steer his nephew away from gangs and street life. But those arguments struggled against the reality of Simeon's record. His problems with law enforcement reportedly began around the age of 10, and by the time he encountered Nathan, investigators described him as someone who had long since stopped valuing either his own life or the lives of others. What shocked people most was Simeon Adams's behavior inside the courtroom. Rather than showing remorse or even basic regret, he appeared completely indifferent throughout much of the trial. According to people present in court, Simeon was seen smiling during several hearings while looking toward Nathan's grieving relatives, behavior that disturbed even courthouse deputies. Then came the moment for victim impact statements. Jennifer somehow found the strength to speak. She openly described the panic attacks, sleepless nights, and unbearable grief she continued living with every single day after losing her husband. But then she said something no one in the courtroom expected to hear. Jennifer publicly forgave the person responsible for her husband's death, even though he had never asked for forgiveness. The defendant's reaction to Jennifer's statement was ice cold. When the judge directly asked Simeon whether the widow's words and the family's pain had affected him in any way, he answered with just 3 words, "No, Your Honor." At that moment, Nathan's mother could no longer endure sitting in the same courtroom with someone who viewed the loss of her son with such indifference. She quietly stood up and walked out of the room. While delivering the sentence, the judge made a statement that stayed with many people following the case. She said Nathan was exactly the kind of person who would have tried to help someone like Simeon when he was younger and struggling. But through his own choices, Simeon had thrown away any chance at that kind of redemption. The case never made it to a full jury verdict. Instead, Simeon Adams accepted a plea agreement and formally admitted guilt in Nathan's death. In the end, he received a sentence of 55 years in prison. At the same time, prosecutors also pursued charges connected to the restaurant shooting involving Eric, where Simeon received an additional 12 years for attempted homicide. Under American sentencing laws, penalties like these are often stacked one after another. But in this case, the court ruled that the sentences would run concurrently, meaning they would be served at the same time rather than separately. Under Indiana law, someone convicted of crimes this severe must serve at least half of the imposed sentence before becoming eligible for possible release. That means Simeon would not even qualify for parole consideration until roughly 27 years had passed, by which point he would already be well into his 40s. Many people were outraged that the second individual seen on surveillance footage that morning never faced criminal punishment. Prosecutors argued they lacked evidence proving he actively participated in the attack itself. On the video, he was seen nearby, but investigators claimed there was no proof he encouraged or directly assisted in the shooting. Instead, he became a key witness for the prosecution in building the case against Simeon. And so, officially, responsibility for the tragedy fell onto one person alone. The system that had ignored 9 separate violations of Simeon's house arrest had finally locked the cell door behind him. But the cost of that delay was devastatingly high. After the courtroom doors finally closed and Simeon Adams began serving decades behind bars, Jennifer and the entire Trapuzzano family faced a different kind of battle, learning how to live again after unimaginable loss. For them, grief became intertwined with a deeper mission, making sure Nathan's name would be remembered for more than just the tragedy on West 16th Street. Jennifer found the strength to keep moving forward. She completed her graduate degree and continued building the future she and Nathan once dreamed about together. Today, she works in the medical field, while doing everything she can to provide Cecilia Marie with the life Nathan had hoped to give his daughter himself. Cecilia Marie was born just 3 weeks after her father's death. Family members have often said that she became a living reflection of Nathan. She inherited his facial features, his smile, and even certain expressions and mannerisms he never had the chance to teach her himself. For the family, Cecilia's arrival became the one light breaking through an otherwise unbearable darkness. They truly believe her birth helped them survive the overwhelming grief and injustice surrounding what happened. For Jennifer, her daughter became the reason to keep moving forward during nights filled with exhaustion, sleeplessness, and the crushing realization that the life they had carefully built together had been destroyed by a teenager carrying a stolen handgun. But Jennifer also held on to one deeply personal connection to Nathan all these years. On March 31st, 2014, only hours before that final morning run, Nathan left her a voicemail message. To this day, Jennifer still listens to that recording every single day. According to her, hearing his voice helps her feel like he never truly disappeared, even though the pain of losing him still feels as sharp now as it did in those first devastating days. That voicemail became the final digital trace of a man who usually left his phone at home for safety reasons, yet ultimately became the victim of a tragedy in the very place where he felt secure. As time passed, Jennifer slowly began rebuilding her life. Several years after losing Nathan, she met someone she felt ready to trust with her future. She remarried and later welcomed 2 more daughters into her family. Today, their household is a family of 5. And even though Cecilia Marie now has a stepfather and younger sisters, Nathan Trapuzzano's memory still holds a special place inside their home, because this story is ultimately about how one brief and senseless encounter at 5 o'clock in the morning destroyed one man's future, but could not destroy the people who chose to carry his legacy forward. The tragedy on West 16th Street remains remembered in Indianapolis as an example of catastrophic systemic failure. But for the people closest to Nathan, it became something else entirely. A story proving that love can outlive even the darkest act of human cruelty.
Support us by liking and subscribing. Share your theories in the comments. Until next time, stay vigilant.